Kabbalah views everything that is happening as a result of two opposite forces. There is none that does not obey the iron law of gradual evolution resulting from the collision of these two forces with one another. One, a positive force, meaning constructive, and two, a negative force, meaning negative and destructive. They create and complement the entire reality, in general and particular, through their harsh and perpetual war with one another until they reach their ultimate perfection. So, what have we been told here about the structure of reality, about the nature of evolution? Kabbalah views everything that is happening as a result of two opposite forces. We can call them positive and negative, as Baal Sulam just showed us, or plus and minus. And so these two opposite forces run through all of reality, from the micro to the macro, from quantum fluctuations to social and economic processes in human society, everything. They may appear as plus and minus, protons and electrons, attraction and rejection, heat and cold, light and darkness, male and female, of course, contraction and expansion, ebb, flow, inhale, exhale, it's everywhere. They can take the shape of physical processes or chemical reactions or biological processes or even psychological discernments. We're talking about two opposite forces that make up each and every layer of nature: still, vegetative, animate, and of course, human. And everything that we see in one way or another is the result of the collision, the tension, the polarity between these two forces. So just to make it Kabbalistically clear, we are talking about everything in our world, in our material world, being the result of these two forces which are fundamentally non-material. We're talking about all of the manifestations of these two forces, as the many examples that I just gave. They are results of two primordial non-material qualities that come before there is even a material world. And these two qualities, in the wisdom of Kabbalah, we call them the light and the kli, or the quality of bestowal and the quality of reception. So these two forces of bestowal and reception, giving and receiving, the interplay between them creates everything in our world, our whole material reality, and the evolution from one level of life to the next. Now let's continue to Baal Sulam's example. Let's take planet Earth as an example. First, it was but a ball of fog-like gas. Through the gravity inside it, over time, it concentrated the atoms in it into a closer circle. As a result, the ball of gas became a liquid ball of fire. Over eons of terrible wars between the two forces within Earth, the positive and the negative, the chilling force in it was finally triumphant over the force of liquid fire. It cooled a thin crust around the Earth and hardened there. However, the planet had not yet grown still from the war between the forces, and after some time the liquid fire erupted in great tumult from the bowels of the earth, rising and shattering the cold, hard crust to pieces. Thus the eons interchanged, and each time the cooling force prevailed, the crust it made grew thicker. Finally, the positive forces overpowered the negative ones and came into complete harmony. The liquids took their place in the bowels of the earth, and the cold crust became thick enough around them to enable the creation of organic life on top of it, as it is today. So what do we have here? We have a Kabbalist describing the planet Earth, the formation of planet Earth, that is, from this perspective or through this Kabbalistic prism of the two opposite forces that are gradually creating the conditions for the next level of life to emerge. So what do we have here? We have a positive force and we have a negative force. Now, what Baal HaSulam explains to us is that the distance, the gap, the difference between them is gradually growing. I'm going to use a triangle to symbolize that, to signify this. Triangle because it's triangle means delta. I believe it's the fourth letter in Greek, and it's typically used in mathematics to denote change or difference. So the absolute difference between the plus and the minus is growing. So that is essentially what is happening in all of evolution. We see this gap or this delta growing and growing and growing, right? Let me just write this here. Let's call it delta. Let me use this font. All right. So this is what Baal HaSulam explains to us. The delta between the two forces grows, and that necessitates each time it grows, it necessitates a new kind of relationship between the two forces. And because the gap is growing, the relationship between the two forces needs to be more advanced, and that is what creates the next level of life each time. Just like how he gave us this example with the planet Earth, that the plus and minus forces, the positive and the negative, manifested as a cooling force and a heating force, and they were in constant war until it enabled them to achieve some equilibrium, some balance, some homeostasis. But it's a complicated one. It's a complex one every time that they grow. So in the case of planet Earth, we have finally a situation where the warmth stays in the bowels of the earth, and around it there is a crust that is cool enough to use both the heat inside and the coolness on the outside to enable the creation of organic life on Earth, to enable the next level of development. Let's keep going with Baal HaSulam. All organisms develop by the same order. From the moment they are planted to the end of their ripening, they undergo hundreds of periods of situations due to the two forces, positive and negative, and their war against each other. And these wars yield the ripening of the fruit. Okay, let me stop here for a second. Again, we have plus and we have the minus, and we have the growth of the delta between them, the difference between them. But now he tells us this is the order of development with any organism, beginning from even the still level of nature and then going up to the vegetative level of nature and also the animate level of nature. So all these organisms are the result of these two forces. They are combinations. They are advanced increasingly advanced relationships between the two opposite forces. And so each time the delta is growing, right? So let's put here another one and another one, but whoops, there we go. This one is bigger than the previous one, and this one is even bigger than the previous one. All right. So now, let's see what happens next. Back to Baal HaSulam's quote. For us, however, the material force, for us meaning humans, right? For us humans, however, the material force is insufficient to bring us to completion due to the contemplative power in us, which is thousands of times more valuable than the material force in us. Thus, for humans, there's a new order. Listen up. Thus, for humans, there is a new order of gradual development, unlike any other animal. The gradual development of human thought. So what is he telling us here? The process continues and creates the next level of development, but between the animate level and then the next level of development, we don't just have the biggest delta here. It's not just a bigger delta. The human level is unique in that this kind of relationship that is being formed between the plus and the minus on the human level is of a completely different nature, of a completely different quality, and that is a relationship that demands our conscious participation, our conscious involvement in the process. And so, while with all the other organisms, with all the other levels of nature actually, still vegetative and animate, the relationship between the plus and the minus is achieved instinctively. So we have the cooling force and the heating force, and ultimately they reach homeostasis, and that enables biological life on planet Earth. And then we have the flora and fauna of Earth developing all kinds of creatures, a diversity and infinity of creatures that are essentially different manifestation of the combination between the positive force and the negative force. But all of these relationships, all of these degrees of connections between plus and minus, they're all instinctive. Nature just creates the homeostasis. What happens on the human level is that the gap between the plus and the minus is so great, and the relationship that is required between the plus and the minus in order to create balance, in order to create homeostasis, the relationship is so advanced that it requires conscious participation. And that's the big deal with human beings. And this is what makes us so very different from all the other levels of development.